Hello, Tommy. As promised and delayed, here are some thoughts and responses. So, the first is that this is basically going to be a presentation of its own, and you can juxtapose it against what you wrote and see where we're agreeing and where I'm critiquing what you're saying. So, the first issue is terminological and involves the word style, and I'm bringing it up to shoot it in the head. The word style helps us, not even a little. And I want to break out some of your concepts from each other because they are categorically different from one another. One of them involves what you're describing as, I'm going to describe it as a healthy, competitive form of play. Now, the word competition raises 20 red flags, and everybody's like, oh, player versus player. No. Just think of it, some people call it challenge. And I'm just real tired of everybody seeking the right word because everybody's emotional. We know what we're talking about. We're talking about fun in the form of, can I do this? And you may call it winning or not winning, but certainly a loss function is involved. And it may not be a traumatic loss either, but it is certainly designated as such, experienced as such, acknowledged as such. Honorable loss is certainly part of the picture. So again, healthy, okay? We're not talking about anything I'm dissing. In this particular case, there's a teamwork element. There's also a setup element and a sense of, on the part of the person who does the setup, that they're playing too. That they are not this, oh, no, you did. They can't move the goalposts, that kind of thing. So fine. This is not a style. This is a purpose. This is a really big deal. This is a why we play, why we came here, what we're doing this for, whether we're glad we did it, whether we're glad we did it with this system, whether we're glad we did it with these people. It's a big deal. And as we all know, this particular purpose can be met with a wide variety of media, a wide variety of activities that it can apply to our particular funky little fun medium here is no surprise. I can't think of anything that humans do that can't be purposed toward this as a leisure activity, as a professional activity even. So anyway, it's a purpose, and just like all of the purposes of play, which in my opinion are relatively few, they may be met, or it may be met, with a huge variety of techniques. That's why there isn't one sport, why there isn't one playing card game, and there is not one role-playing set of techniques toward which this purpose, which may be turned toward this purpose. So let's take a look then at everything else you talked about, which I consider to be techniques. And one of them has to do with the preparation, the presence, if you want to be a little more abstract. I don't really care when they're made up, as long as they are, in fact, made up and treated as entities, active, present, in an imaginative sense. That are situated and also active around and about, whether the characters are touching them or not. And this is fine. It's a technique. You call it sandbox, whatever. I consider that to be a degenerate term dragged in from another medium, and that I'm of no interest whatsoever in that term as such. I am interested in the technique, and I recognize it. What I'm saying is that it has no specific relationship to the purpose in question, and that it may be present toward other purposes. So that's one thing. Now, another one has to do with what I call the crawl, and that's not a derisive term. It is the context of adventure, acquisition, relative to risk, and then reaping the consequences of how well you did, and then going back into the cycle. And it's called the crawl in relationship to the term dungeon crawl. But I remove the word dungeon because it doesn't have to be a dungeon. Just if that is the dynamic of play. Now, that means that you could go into a dungeon with a team of adventurers and not be playing the crawl. That's true. That's important because I want to decouple from the crawl, which is a matter of risk and reward, often involves turnaround decisions, right? How far have we gone? How much have we suffered because of it? How much have we got? And what's it going to be like to get back? And then you sort of make this turnaround decision that's often involved. Well, anyway, but you could be, for example, playing the crawl in any setting with any justification, with any way to define player characters and any relationship between, player characters and, players and game master or anything like that. All right. So there's this crawl thing. And then, as I just mentioned, there's also this imagined context of, well, is it, an underground complex, and are we fantasy characters and stuff like that? So notice how many techniques I just threw out. One is this business of the persistent, active, and interactive set of imagined locations and situations. Another one is the crawl as game mechanics and as a focus of, okay, this is our strategic or this is our contextual notion of how we're operating with the system. And then there's also this business of whether it's dungeony or not in terms of the imagined content. Now, here's another subroutine that is a subroutine of the risk factor, which is character death. And I'm also going to decouple that. Nothing I've said so far has any particular necessary requirement in terms of the risk of death, in terms of how frequent it is, in terms of, how much you have to push it in order to get there, anything like that. It's a completely different variable. So you could play a game with or without that larger purpose, with that purpose or with some other, that is to say, and you could take any of these other techniques and mix and match them, absent, present, extreme, not very extreme, or whatever. And any of these are viable. So let's move to another point, which I think is a grander one, an extremely important point. And you talk about the role of the dungeon master in these games as neutral. Another word which I find deeply unhelpful. What you describe is that a person who has specific responsibilities during play is to honor the system by which we play, so that whatever consequences arise through systemic procedures or the way people talk and how they are empowered to contribute to what's going on, even if it's just to say, I swing at the goblin or whatever it is that a person is, empowered to do, that this person has no special role toward those principles and themselves are subject to whatever the rules are. When I say the rules, don't get all upset. We're not talking about what's in a text. We're talking about the way we do it here. And so that's all it means. You're talking about how nobody at the table has a special role toward how we do things. They may have a different set of responsibilities than the other people, but that's all. Now, I maintain that this, again, has absolutely nothing to do with a given purpose. There is no purpose of play for which that is an invalid concept. There is frankly, no purpose of play in which that is, violating it is a valid one. And that's actually an important point. Here, we're moving actually to the biggest layer of the whole thing about role-playing, why I call it the big model, because we're talking about social personal obligations toward one another relative to how we're playing. And if one person is literally special in this regard, then basically they're not playing. They're nannying or den-daddying play. They are they're invalidating play. The fact that this has been noted or even encouraged as a form of role playing, or even as synonymous with certain terms, particularly those indicated by an article, the GM, the dungeon master, that this is that this person's role is flexible by system and by table is fine. That makes perfectly good sense. I'm talking about in whatever position that may be at this table for this game we're playing for these people, whether that person gets to basically say, oh, no, we don't do that. We did it. That's how we did it. But no, we're not doing it now. That's no. Why? Because I say so. And because I'm making sure that all of this goes the way that I consider best. And take that to any other human activity, any other social leisure activity, and you'll find that it is, non-viable. Nobody wants it. Nobody tolerates it. And it doesn't work in role-playing either. So again, this particular thing is actually quite a big deal and does not, in any way, relate to, for example, improvisation of material. That is a technique in and of itself. It does not relate to designated things like what you're allowed to say, on the basis of an outcome of a role. Again, those are part of what we do here. So even if that role includes in and of itself considerable creative scope, I'm talking about the ability to override how we do it and how we've been doing it in the moment, whenever, because I'm that guy. So with that in place, I am specifically saying not only is this not associated with that particular purpose of play that you're talking about, that is to say necessarily associated, but it is associated with all of play. This is a generalized issue of great importance. So all of this is to say that I completely get the kind of play you're talking about. What I'm looking at with some astonishment is your notion that you need to explain it to anybody as an integrated, necessarily linked up package. And I think personally, this is extremely related to my Finding D&D series, particularly the part about essentialism and about some of the questions that I asked toward the end of that series. But that's, up to you whether you want to investigate that or care what I talk about at all. So anyway, what I'm interested here in your presentation is I want to take a look at one of the games that you're talking about. When I say games, I mean the game experiences. I'm not interested in your generalization across them, actually. I'm certainly not interested in any sort of the OSR or what OSR means to me or anything like that. Again, obstructive terms of no intellectual interest. So let's take a look instead at what you've played. I want to know more about it. I want to know how it went. I want to celebrate it. You don't have to convince me or anyone that it's okay to do this. That's kind of and sort of explain it, because we know other people don't get it. Accept it. We get it. All of us. We enjoy it. A lot of us. We can do it. Too. So share. Tell me more. I want to know about any of the single experiences that you mentioned. I want to know when the elf lady cut off the guy's head. I want to know about when they dangled off the balcony, and how you did that. That's funny. In that particular rule set, there is no role for, grabbing someone's wrist and pulling them up on the balcony. In one group, they may say, I do that. And we're done. Another one says, well, this is going to be a save versus paralysis. And there's rules which say that explicitly. There's rules that don't. These game texts you're talking about are remarkably diverse, and I'm interested in how you did it. Not as you did it wrong, but I'm interested in how it went. And what did you all do to make it go? So please share.